So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about mastering deep water drop shot, which is something we do a lot of out here on the West Coast. Again, my name is Ricky Shabazz. I'm a marine specialist for Navionics. I want to thank you all for joining me. There we go. So a little bit about me while we get started. I'm a West Coast tournament angler, outdoor rider. I'm located in Southern California. Actually, I'm coming to you from beautiful San Diego, where it was about 75 degrees today. So shout out to all those snowbirds in the east and in the north. I could have wore shorts today to work. My home lakes are Diamond Valley Lake in Hemet, California, which is a very deep, clear lake, which is where a lot of the presentation is going to come from today. I do fish tournaments, FLW, Costa, Wild West Bass, One Bass, and several team events on the West Coast. Do some writing for westernbass.com, One Bass, and Bass West. And I do seminars all over the country, mainly at Bass Pro Shops. Again, I'm a marine specialist for Navionics, which is basically a fancy title for me helping people learn how to get the most out of their fish finders, out of their mapping. This is all about you catching more fish. You see my list of sponsors. I do have the fortune of running a new Ranger 520L, even though there's a typo there, it says C. And the units that I run are very important. There's a lot of great products on the market. This is not a sales campaign. This is about you learning how to catch more drop shot. You are going to need good electronics, whether it be Humminbird or Garmin. There's a lot of great electronics out there. I happen to be running Lowrance. You're going to see some screenshots. The number one question I get is, how do you tell a fish down deep? And I'm going to show you some screenshots of what a fish actually looks like out in 50, 60, 70 feet of water. There's my contact information. If you'd like to get a hold of me, that'll come back up later on in the presentation. It's rshabazz@navionics.com, or my website with my team partner, www.teamblinkfishing.com. You can like me on Facebook. We are going to get to your questions. So again, thank you for taking time to join the webinar. I'm going to talk for about 20 or 30 minutes. As I mentioned, if you're expecting Paul, he's my boss at Navionics. My name's actually Ricky Shabazz. The webinar will be recorded. It will be available via navionics.com in a couple of days. It'll also be uploaded to YouTube. Everyone is muted, so you should be able to see a prompt on your screen to ask questions. We're not going to raise our hands. What you're going to want to do is use the chat function. I'm going to go through all the chat and try to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. So here are the topics I'm going to cover. First of all, what is deep water? I consider the deep water out west anything deeper than 45 feet. I routinely catch fish out in 45 to 60 feet of water. I'll show you what that looks like. Here are some of the locations we're going to go over: channel swings, humps, points. These are the main kind of things you're going to be looking for as you try to catch fish on a drop shot out deep. I'm going to go over some of the techniques and lures, primarily the drop shot. Again, if anyone has a question, just click on the chat button at the bottom. If I don't get to your question, email me. People email me. I get about 5 to 10 emails a day about Navionics, about fishing. I'm here to answer your questions. It is about you being able to learn more about how to use the technology, to have more fun on the water, to take people out fishing, to catch fish. And I tell people all the time, I like catching. I don't like fishing. So drop shotting, this is a great picture of what we're talking about when it comes to drop shotting. We're talking primarily from a boat. I mean, certainly you can drop shot from the shore, but today's topic is about drop shotting out deep water. So you're going to monitor or locate the fish on your fish finder. I'm going to show you some screenshots of what a bass looks like. And you're going to fish the drop shot one of three ways. You're either going to fish it vertically, meaning you see a fish on the screen and you just drop your bait right down. Second way that you fish it is you're going to cast toward an object. And the third way that you fish it is just dragging it along some kind of object. And we're going to go over those three areas or three types of presentations later on. You see the type of knot that we tie. There's a lot of great knots out there. I typically either tie a Palomar knot or an improved clinch knot using fluorocarbon. Again, I'm going to go over all of this later on in the presentation. You're either going to fish the bait Texas style on a drop shot, which you're going to primarily use when you are fishing around cover to avoid getting hung up, or you're going to fish it what we call wacky style. And I'm going to show an example of that later on. And you see, based on this diagram, the way you fish a drop shot is you either make a cast, drop it vertically, or you're dragging the bait to where you have marked fish. But one of the biggest parts to drop shotting is having good electronics and finding the fish and having good equipment. So what is deep water? Again, we routinely catch fish out west in 50 to 60 feet of water. You need to read maps and contours is a must. Again, good electronics takes the guesswork out of it. I'm going to show you how to read the electronics. You're really looking for bait, and you're looking for channel swings, you're looking for humps, you're looking for points. I don't fish a drop shot out deep unless I'm marking bass. So there's no substitute for seat time. And so what you see here on the left is a Lowrance HDS 16. And if you see my arrow there, that is actually a bass. I'm going to show you that a little while later. And this is on the down scan. You know, again, there's a lot of great products out there in terms of electronics. Just get whatever you can afford, get what you're comfortable for. But this is what a bass looks like on a Lowrance. And you ask, well, how do I know that's a bass? Well, I dropped down there and I caught it. That's how I knew I was a bass. But I wouldn't even stop. And what this is a picture of some flooded trees in a lake called San Vicente. So San Vicente has a lot of trees down in 50, 40, 30, 60 feet of water. So this is a bass actually suspended over a tree. And we're going to come back to this picture later on in the presentation. On the right is an example of what we call sonar logging. And so I'm using my Lowrance to update the maps of the lakes that I fish so I actually know what's underneath the water. And I'm going to go over that a little later as well. So the main thing about fishing out deep is there's a saying that 90% of the fish live in 10% of the water. So as fishermen, as anglers, we're always out on the water trying to find the mother lode of bass, what we would call those unmolested fish that are not on the bank. Now, there's no doubt that a certain percentage of bass live shallow year round. I fish lakes out west that are highly pressured that require us to master the art of reading electronics, master the art of fishing light line, and master the art of fishing deep. And so that starts with looking at a map. This is a map of Diamond Valley, which is my home lake. And you could just look at the lake and see humps and a lot of contours and coves and points. Where do you start? First, you start by getting off the bank and targeting humps, points, and channel swings. You're looking for things that are not obvious that you can only find by reading your electronics or reading a map. And so there are different types of maps out there. Certainly, I work for Navionics, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the differences. I get this question a lot on social media. Well, which map do I use if I'm going to go out and do what you're going to talk about today? There are really two basic maps. There are a number of different ones, but these are the two ones that we hear about the most. Platinum Plus and a Navionics Plus or a Navionics Regions card. The Navionics Plus, the main difference is going to give you 3D and it's going to give you satellite. For everyday bass fishing, you're really not going to need that. The only time I use satellite imaging or a Platinum Plus is if I'm fishing somewhere like the Cal Delta or the Louisiana Delta, which are marsh areas. So you're looking at satellites because the mapping is not great for those areas. I would say 90+% of the time, I'm using a Regions Plus card, which is preloaded with lakes for your regions. It's plug play. The benefit of using a Navionics chart, whether it be Platinum Plus or Regions, Navionic Regions, is that it has 1 foot contours. That's how you're going to find humps. That's how you're going to find breaks. That's how you're going to find channel swings, are those 1 foot contours. And that's very important to learning how to catch fish out deep. This is a shot of my new Ranger, and what I've got going on here is I'm connecting my Lowrance HDS-12 via the Wi-Fi and or the Bluetooth to my iPhone 10. And so what I'm able to do with that is actually make live maps of the lake while I'm out on the water. Once you set this up by going into your Wi-Fi, and I have videos on YouTube about how to do this. That's not the purpose of this presentation today, but what I wanted to say is that this is how you get the most updated maps of any lake that you fish, is by making live maps on the water. And you can only do this by connecting your phone via Wi-Fi using the Navionics app, which is about $10 a year on the phone, to the Wi-Fi in my Lowrance. Now, I'm running mapping on both. And what that gives me is that the map in the phone app is always live. So when Navionics pushes out a new map, it pushes out to the website and it pushes it out to the phone app. The card or the chart for your fish finder, eventually you're going to have to put that in your computer and update it to get the most current version of the map of the lake that you fish. Mapping is a key part of this. And these are just some screenshots of me connecting my Lowrance is one of my older boats, a Lowrance HDS-12, my iPad, and my phone. Now, you may say, why do you want to do that? What does that have to do with catching fish on a drop shot? I don't know about you, but I have a day job. I'm actually a president of a community college. So I'm in meetings, I'm traveling, I'm studying, and so I'm not on the water as much as I would like to. So the way that I start to plan out my day of where I'm going to find these humps and points and channel swings is sitting in the comfort of my home, so I don't have to go out and get in my boat. I can mark these spots and find them on my iPad or my cell phone, put a GPS waypoint in my iPad and my cell phone, and there's something called Sonar Sync, which when I get in my boat, my Lowrance will recognize my iPad or my phone, and those GPS waypoints will automatically upload into my unit. I don't know if you all heard me, but that is great technology, that I can make a waypoint and do studying of some of these spots in the comfort of my home and find a spot like you see here that may hold bass, put a waypoint into my iPad or my iPhone, get it in my boat, and go directly to that spot. And here's an example of doing that. This is Castaic Lake. That's about a 6-pounder caught off an underwater hump. In this case, this hump is marked, but what's not marked is on the backside of the hump is a channel swing. And so everybody was casting directly at the buoy marker, right? That's a no-brainer, where if you're a bass and you keep seeing lures and lines and baits thrown at you, eventually you're going to get tired of getting caught. So you're going to back off to either a break, a channel swing, a point, something. And mind you, a lot of our lakes out west don't have structure. So structure to a bass out west is either a point, a hump, or a channel swing. So this fish was caught on the back side of the hump on a channel swing on a drop shot. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. Again, this is what a channel swing looks like. Now, this is taken directly off of the Navionics website. This is free. You can go to Navionics right now, navionics.com, go to your favorite lake and start studying. Now, you won't be able to do those same waypoint things that I just talked about. You got to have the app or in your iPad or your iPhone. But you can start doing some research on the lakes that you fish. What you have here is a channel swing with a deep creek channel that runs down it. This is a high percentage spot. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you all about today is called high percentage spots. And I see some of you all are asking questions already. I'm going to get to your questions toward the end, but keep putting information about the questions that you all have. So this is a screenshot from the Navionics website of a high percentage spot, what I would call a channel swing. It actually is a deep creek that has a channel swing on it, right? And so this is the kind of spots I'm going to be looking for as I'm looking to identify bass. This is that same spot a little closer in, taken from the screenshot on the unit. Now you see the difference between the website and the unit. There's a channel swing, there's a submerged culvert. Those are the kinds of things you're looking at. Road beds, submerged stumps. Those are going to start turning into high percentage spots that you want to start at. And you say, well, that's 240 feet of water, 230 feet of water. Yes, but if you look to the right of it, along this buoy, there's 70 feet. I'm probably going to start there. I'm not going to start out in 240 or 180, but I'm going to start looking around in this area for things that are shallower, because that tends to be where the bass are going to stay. Rock piles are another great way to catch fish out deep on a drop shot. And again, we're starting with what to look for. Then we're going to go into baits and techniques a little later. This is a rock pile. I love to fish rock piles out in 40 to 50 feet. This rock pile is sitting in about 55 feet of water. And you say, well, how do you know there's a fish? These red lines or these arrows show you what a fish looks like on a rock pile. That is a fish right there. That is a fish right there. And eventually you just get used to knowing what a fish looks like. This may be fish there, but it actually wasn't. It was a tree. So there's a rock pile with a tree next to it. And I know that because I fished the spot. But if I see something like this, I'm going to mark a waypoint on my fish finder, and I'm going to come back and take a look at that. Someone has said aqua view. Absolutely. If you got time to drop an aqua view down and look at a spot like that, I think that's a great idea. For me and those of us who fish tournaments, I'm trying to fish 30 or 40 spots like this a day to identify 5 or 6 that have bass on. So if I had to drop that aqua view down 50 or 60 times, I don't have time for that. I'm going to pull up on a spot. I'm going to do figure 8s, figure out whether or not I'm actually marking a bass, and I'm going to drop down there. And the beauty of identifying spots out in 50, 60 feet of water, they're not used to seeing lures down that deep. So if there's a bass down there and you mark it on your fish finder, usually you're going to drop down there and catch them. Points and saddles, tapers are great ways to find bass. In this case, this is Diamond Valley Lake again. This is an underwater point. The lakes out west are low. So even though this shows 130 feet, at the time that we found this spot, the lake was down 90 feet, which meant that this spot was in like 40 feet of water. Game on. And what you see in this case is a series of points, humps, and channel swings. This is a high percentage spot. I've caught more bass off of this spot than anywhere else in Diamond Valley. This is an underwater point. It's not on the map if you don't know how to read a map. At the right water level, this spot loads up with fish because it's a series of points with humps and channel swing. Here's another example of a hump. This is Castaic Lake. This is a hump with a channel swing on it. What are these depths or elevations? These are depths. This is coming from the map. Again, this is a screenshot of the free map at Navionics.com, but it would be the same map that's on your chart for your unit, your electronics, or the app on your phone, your tablet. These are depths, 90 feet. This is another lake that's very low. It's down 50 feet. So that 90 feet all of a sudden is 40 feet. And all of a sudden you have a hump and a channel swing. Let's talk real quick about how to read this map. And again, we're going to get into techniques. But first you got to find them before you can catch them. The tighter the lines, the more vertical or deeper water. The wider the lines, the more consistent the water is. So when you're looking at a map and you see the lines going from being tighter or closer to wider or further, That's how you know the difference between deep water and shallow water. And not all the time when it's wider, it means it's shallow. It just means it's consistent. I mean, there's no change. There's no contour. And when you're bass fishing, what you're looking for are contours. You're looking for breaks, points, humps, being able to read those contour lines based on them being closer together or further apart to tell you what's underneath the water. What I mean by a channel swing, great question. A channel swing is when the deeper water touches the shallow water. So in some instances, in some parts of the country, they may call them bluffs. A lot of times when a channel swing runs into the bank, it'll form a bluff, but not in all cases, because that channel swing, depending on what kind of lake or reservoir or river you're fishing, that channel swing could be related to a bluff. It could be related to a flat. It could be related to a creek channel. And essentially a channel swing is where the deeper water runs somewhere into something. Could be a point, could be a hump, could be a bluff. What is a saddle? A saddle is essentially where two humps meet or 2 points meet. So let's say you had 2 humps, the saddle would be between them. If you had 2 humps that were close to each other, you'd had a hump where the water came up, then the water came back down. And I'll go back over that a little later. Here's another example of a hump. Again, our lakes are down. So even though this says 115 feet, this lake is down about 50 or 60 feet. So all of a sudden, that hump comes into play. So to sum up that piece before we get into baits, good electronics, the web app on your phone or your tablet, whether you want to use satellite overlay or not, is really about having data and being able to process that data to be able to find the fish, because you can't catch them if you can't find them. The other thing that's really important is how you set up your boat. I always run a GPS module or a GPS puck at my trolling motor. Most of the units nowadays come with a built-in GPS, but the puck usually is 4 to 10 times faster. The other thing that does is if I'm driving my boat and I hit a waypoint, meaning I see a high percentage spot, I mark a bass, and I hit a waypoint, that waypoint, if I have a puck, is going to go to the trolling motor, which means that when I get up to the trolling motor, I'm more likely to pinpoint that area where I now have marked where I believe a bass is. Shallow water on the fish finder is for anything lakes. Anything deeper than a lake, like the ocean, meaning over 100, 200 feet, is when you want to turn the shallow water off. Here's that same spot that I showed you all a little while ago. This is actually a screenshot from the unit. Shows me driving around. You see all these lines where I drove around, marked a spot. This is where that spot where I caught that 6-pounder. And this is what it looks like from finding the spot on the web app and actually finding it on the fish finder. So here's that screenshot on the very first, one of the first slides. What does a fish look like? I get asked this question in every seminar. I have a Lowrance, I have a Humminbird, I have a Garmin. I spent all this money on a fish finder. I don't know what a fish looks like. This is San Vicente Lake, out about 55 feet of water. I mentioned that the lake has a lot of trees in it. And this is what a bass looks like. When you're driving around and you see something like these marks, you see where the arrows are, chances are it's going to be a bass. Now, if you're in a lake that has crappie, could be a crappie. If you're in a lake that has white bass, yes, it could be a white bass. Most of the lakes that we fish out west don't have those kind of fish in it. And so out west, if I'm out marking fish with my fish finder and my mapping, and I see this, I'm going to hit a waypoint like you see on the screenshot, and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to fish that spot. Here's another example of what a bass looks like. This is out in about 80, no, this is about 50 feet of water, the top of a hump, and there are trees on this hump, and there are bass suspended over the trees. When I see, if you're driving around and you see this, you want to hit a GPS waypoint, you want to turn around, back around and fish that. And these are excellent areas to fish with a drop shot. This screenshot is taken at idle speed. You know, and by idle, I was probably going 2 or 3 miles an hour. I knew it was a high percentage spot. I'm just trying to pinpoint where the fish are located. This is a screenshot that I'm going to show you, San Vicente. I'm going to show you a video of this. This is me marking bass. Yes, that is 120 feet of water. Those are 2 bass out in 120 feet of water. So let's get now to the technique. We talked about you've spent your time idling, graphing, putting waypoints. You found the fish. Now you got to figure out how to catch them. My drop shot setup for deep water consists of either 6 or 8 pound test. You want to use fluorocarbon. I always use fluorocarbon to a braid leader. I use Daiwa's Samurai braid. There's a lot of great braid out there. Again, this is about helping you. This is not about selling products. I connect my braid to my fluorocarbon using a double uni connection knot. Some people use an Albright knot. They're very hard knots to learn how to tie, but once you learn how to tie them, they're easy. I learned the uni to uni knot, so that's the one I tie. The reason why you want to use a leader of fluorocarbon and then braid is you're fishing out deep, and braid doesn't have stretch. So I'll typically have anywhere from 5 to 10 feet of fluorocarbon tied on braided line. 6 to 8 pound fluorocarbon tied to either 15 or 20 pound braided line. Now, some guys have gone to a yellow or a colored braided line. Personally, I don't like that, but there's nothing wrong with it. My team partner uses yellow line. I use green. We both catch the same number of fish. The main thing when you're fishing this deep is you want to use braided line tied to a fluorocarbon leader so that you get a better hook set and you get better feel down in deeper water. I typically tie either a Palomar and improved clinch to the hook. Weights. Traditionally, I'm going to use a lead cylinder weight, either size 3/16, quarter, or 3/8. The deeper I'm fishing, the heavier weight I use, but you want to use the lightest weight you can get away with. The reason why I'll use a 3/8 or even a ½ ounce drop shot weight is if I'm fishing in 40 or 50, particularly 50 or 60 feet of water, and I mark a bass, a lot of times I fish those fish vertically, meaning I'm not casting. I'm just opening my bail, and I want that bait to get down there where that fish is quick. If I'm fishing around wood, I'm going to use a lead weight. If I'm fishing rock, clay, or sand, or mainly something I'm not getting hung up in, I'm going to use a tungsten weight. The advantage to the tungsten weight is that you feel the bottom. You can feel, you have better feel with a tungsten weight, but tungsten weights are expensive. And so if you're fishing trees where you're going to get hung up a lot, I'm traditionally going to use a lead weight. In terms of hooks, I'm either using a 1/0 for a 4-inch worm, or I'm using a 2/0 for a 6-inch worm. I'm using a light wire hook, and you see the diagram. Traditionally going to have anywhere from a 6-inch to a 12-inch leader. I have caught fish on an 18 or 20-inch leader, but I would say that's the exception, not the rule. I traditionally start with 12 inches, which is a foot. Sometimes we do catch fish on 2 or 3 foot leaders, but that's the exception, not the rule. Here's another shot of what a drop shot looks like. Another just diagram. We kind of talked about that already. That's an example of a cylinder weight. I talked about wacky rigging. This is an example of wacky rigging or an open hook. I tend to only use an open hook with a minnow style bait, or if I'm fishing around areas that I'm not going to get hung up, meaning grass, not grass, excuse me, meaning rocks or sand. Baits, which is what I know you all want to know. What kind of baits do we use? Primarily plastic worms, but mix it up. I catch a lot of fish drop shotting a baby brush hog because it mimics a crawdad. A lot of fish that deep are eating crawdads. They're eating minnows, missile bait fuse, baby brush hog, a robo worm in 4 or 6 inch. Slim Cinco, particularly shad pattern, is a great drop shot bait. Wacky style. The fish are on shad, Slim Cinco and shad pattern. Wacky style is hard to beat. Jackal flick shake. These are all great baits to drop shot. If you're used to using a straight tail worm, which is primarily the standard for drop shot, give a baby brush hog a try. You'd be surprised. Minnow style baits. Drop shot a lot of minnow style baits. If the fish are, a lot of fish out west eat this bait called a pond smelt. Shad pattern bait is a great way to catch fish on a drop shot on a pond smelt related bait. Colors. I don't have a lot of color baits. I'm not a tackle junkie. The baits I have, I catch fish on them. I use light colors when it's light outside. I use dark colors when it's dark outside. I heard that a long time ago. That means if it's sunny, use a light color bait. If it's dark, cloudy, use a dark color bait. I use a lot of green pumpkin candies, green pumpkin colors, use a watermelon color, spray grass colors, shad patterns. Use a lot of morning dawn. I have no idea why bass bite a pink worm, but I have won a lot of money fishing a morning dawn color worm. Matter of fact, the very first team tournament I ever won when I was in college, as a freshman in college, was on a morning dawn color worm. For some reason, out in 40, 50, 60 feet of water, that pink worm catches fish, and I have no idea what they think it is. So there are really 4 ways that we're going to fish a drop shot. Out in 45 to 60 feet, the number one way I fish a drop shot is vertically. I mark the fish on my fish finder. I'm using a 3/8 or a ½ ounce weight, and I drop it right on their head. And you'll be surprised the number of bass that eat the drop shot out in 45 to 60 feet of water on the fall. Vertical, right underneath the fish finder. I can see that bait fall on my fish finder. I see the fish bite it. We call that video game fishing out west. And yes, we do that, and we do it all the time. The next way is casting on what we call a slack line shake. You find a spot, rock pile, hump, point. You cast out, you let your bait go to the bottom, and you do a shake. It's called a slack line shake. You shake your bait. That primarily works when the fish are active. Very rarely catch them shaking the bait in the wintertime. The other style is dead sticking. This works effective in the wintertime. You mark fish, you throw your bait out there, and you keep it in place 2 to 3 minutes. Dead sticking. The last and probably the most effective way to catch a fish drop shotting that a lot of people don't talk about is just what we call dragging. It's a slow drift or a slow drag. You mark some fish, you cast past where the fish are, and you just slowly use your trolling motor or the wind to drag the bait into the strike zone. I probably catch more fish dragging than the slack line shake or the dead stick. Again, leader size, Texas rig versus wacky rig. We talked about that. In cover, I'm always going to Texas rig my bait. In open water, I will wacky rig it to give it more action. Let's talk about equipment. There's a lot of great rods and reels on the market. When you're fishing out in 40 to 60 feet of water, you need a highly sensitive rod, which usually means you need an expensive rod. Get whatever you can afford. I'm fortunate enough to have great companies that I work with All my spinning rods are Steves, and I have to be honest with you. These are $400 to $500 rods. They're the only $400 or $500 rods I own, and it's because when I'm fishing out in 40 and 50 feet of water, I want to feel the bite, or I'm going to miss the fish. I can feel what the bottom feels like out in 40 to 60 feet of water with the rods I use. They're also very light. They're very sensitive, but you don't need that to catch fish. You can catch the same fish on a $100 rod or a $50 rod. The difference is I'm going to be able to tell what's underneath the water with that more expensive rod because of the components that the rod are built with. But there's a lot of great rods on the market. Dobbins, Shimano. Use whatever you're comfortable with using. Again, I use a Daiwa ballistic spinning reel. The Daiwa ballistic spinning reels are faster than traditional spinning reels. So when I get bit in 40 to 60 feet of water, that I'm able to catch up with the fish and get that fish in the boat. I traditionally drop shot with 6-pound tests. I personally don't go anything below a 6-pound. My team partner likes to use 4 and 5 pound tests. I just refuse to do it. I catch just as many fish on 6-pound as he does on 4 and 5. I will go up to 8-pound tests if there's a lot of wood or if I'm fishing around docks. What exactly GPS puck do I use? I use the Lowrance GPS. Every brand manufacturer has their own GPS puck. The difference is that the puck, the GPS, the external, I'll just say the GPS puck is a fancy term for saying external GPS. It receives data from the satellite 4 to 10 times faster than the GPS in your fish finder, which means that when I hit waypoint, it's going to be more accurate to where that spot is that I just marked. That is the presentation. We're going to get into the questions now. I have been answering questions as I've gone along. Again, this webinar was or is being videotaped, recorded. It'll be uploaded onto the Navionics website. I want to show you something real quick before I get into the questions. I want to show you what it actually looks like to pull up on the spot. And can you all see the new screen now? Yes, I use a 0.1 GPS, Lowrance GPS. That is the only GPS puck for Lowrance. I could be mistaken. Okay, great. You all can. This is live on the water of what it looks like to find a spot. Ricky Shabazz, Navi. Of course, with the technology. Now it's not working. Here we go. Ricky Shabazz, Navi. All right, let me go back and try that one more time. Of course, technology. Well, you know what, guys? I'm sorry. It looks like the video is not playing for some reason. I was going to try to show you what it looks like to pull up on the spot and actually mark. Let me go to one other video and see if it'll play. Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like it's not working. So let me come back and start to answer questions. Can you all see me now? Again, Ricky Shabazz, Navionics. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I'm going to try to go through some of these questions. I'm going to go back up to the top and just scroll down and try to get as many questions answered. Any deals out there for Navionics renewals? Unfortunately, there are no deals right now for renewals. You get, when you buy a Navionics chip or chart, you get unlimited downloads, uploads, freshest data for a year for when you buy the card. After that, it's $99 a year. Well, why would you want to pay $99? Well, there are guys like myself out there doing the mapping that I showed you. I upload that data to Navionics, and it creates a new map or updated map of whatever lake I'm on. There are hundreds of us, if not thousands of us out there doing that, which means that when I find a spot, I want to share the information because I want you to catch fish out there. And so if you have an old card that you've never registered or you've never updated, you don't have the most current version of the map for the lake you're fishing. So just think about that. It's $99 a year after the first year. The first year is free. Someone says no volume, but people say they're hearing me. I have an HDS7 from 2012. You have a Bluetooth capability to connect to your phone. Depends on what generation you have. Lowrance does have a Wi-Fi module for Gen 2s. I do not believe you can do what I showed you with a Gen 1. In either case, what you can do, though, is still get the Navionics app for your phone. Someone talking about the AquaView, we talked about that. But are these depths or ever? We talked about that. Talked about what a saddle is. Again, a saddle is between two humps where the water, if there are two humps close by, water comes up for the hump, water goes down. That's the saddle that comes back up to the next hump. We talked about that. Talked about the brands of pumps. Question is, can I talk about how to manage fish care? When you're catching fish out in 40 to 60 feet of water, you do have to worry about the fish getting the bends. I keep a needle in the boat. There's a lot of great YouTube videos on how to needle a fish. Generally speaking, if you fight a fish up slow enough, you don't have to worry about the fish needing to be fizzed or getting the bends. If you release that fish quick enough, that fish will go back down into deeper water and it'll survive. If I'm fishing a tournament, though, I'm going to have to use a needle and let the air out of that fish. And there's a lot of great videos on how to do that. We talked about a channel swing. Talked about that. Do I recommend an antenna? Yes, highly recommended. The antennas download data from the satellites, which is what GPS, Global Positioning System. Your fish finder is locking in on those satellites to tell you where your positioning is. If you don't have an external antenna and you hit waypoint, you could be as far away as 20 feet before it locks in. Since the external puck downloads 4 to 10 times faster, you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to find the spot again. What specific feed do I like to search for fish on your electronics? Depends. If I'm fishing a lake that I don't know what's underneath the water, I'll go full speed. And if I go over something that looks interesting, I'll slow down and go back around it. And so typically when I'm really doing research and really studying my craft, I'm probably going 4 to 10 miles an hour. Do I leave my fish finder on factory settings? Generally speaking, yes. These units are powerful. They're plug and play. Now, where I will change things up is on my overlay. Overlay is like your data, your depth, your time, your speed. That's the stuff that I change. Some people change their ping speed. The faster the ping speed, the more data. I don't mess with that stuff. We talked about length of a leader, typically 5 to 10 feet. If I'm going to get broke off a lot, then I'll probably put a couple of yards of leader material. And again, I use a uni-to-uni knot. Do I pull the tagline back through the eyelet? Absolutely, Roy, and thanks for bringing that up. When I tie the knot, what you do is you take the tag in, you put it back through the eye, and it allows that drop shot to stay vertical, or that hook rep. Mini brush hog, absolutely. Mini brush hog, I have one mini $1 on a mini, and it's actually called a tiny brush hog. Tiny brush hog, baby brush hog gets the job done. I don't ever use a drop shot with a swivel. I know people who do. I don't particularly like the drop shot with the swivel. Do I wacky rig or nose hook in winter? If I'm fishing a shad style bait, I'm going to nose hook. If I'm fishing a worm, 90% of the time I'm fishing a Texas rig. Every now and then I will wacky rig. That's not something I do a lot of. Is there a big difference between 6 and 8 pound fluorocarbon? Absolutely there is, but it also depends on the brand. The more higher end brands of fluorocarbon, there isn't a lot of difference. Talked about that. Yes, the Facebook server is slow. It wasn't slow when I was practicing, unfortunately. I do not use 3D, Derek. I haven't gotten into using 3D just because I know what things look like on 2D. And so since I do have a day job, I don't have a lot of time. I already know how to find things and what things look like on 2D. So I don't use 3D. I've seen 3D, it's impressive. I just don't need to use it. Is drop shot appropriate if fish hugging the bottom, or are you targeting fish off the bottom? I'm targeting what's ever down there, whether it's suspended or on the bottom. It's easier to catch the fish that are suspended when you fish vertically, meaning you mark the fish and you just drop the bait right on his head. They'll bite it on the fall. But I absolutely catch fish at every level of the water column. Absolutely. The lighter the line, the more action. But what you really want with the lighter line is the fish can't feel the line with their lateral line. The heavier the line, the fish can feel the line with their lateral line. The lighter the line, the fish just can't detect it. So they say fluorocarbon is supposed to be invisible. It's not. It's not 100% invisible. It's more invisible than mono. So a bass, particularly a highly pressured bass, can feel the line with their lateral line, the heavier the line. What is my opinion on Senate bait? I found that Berkeley works primarily for smallmouth. That gulp stuff is crack for smallmouth. I do use scent. I don't believe in scent as much as my team partner. He sprays Bang on everything. I think he uses Bang for deodorant. Me, on the other hand, I like to marinate my baits in smelly jelly. That's what I primarily use. I do use Bang, but I primarily like smelly jelly. How long do you fish a spot before moving? That is a great question. If I'm on a spot and I'm marking fish and I'm marking a lot of fish and I'm not getting bit, I'm probably going to stay there longer and change baits. If I am on a spot and I drop down there and get bit, I'm probably going to leave because that's telling me that the fish are active. So there's a lot of variables that go in there. At the end of the day, I just think you have to trust your instincts. And if you believe that you're seeing fish down there and you're not getting bit, then I will go through a couple of different bait changes. At least give it, 2 or 3 casts with each a different color, a different size. But generally speaking, that deep, I'm expecting to get bit very quick because the fish are not used to seeing baits down that deep. If I'm fishing deep timber, 40, 60 feet of water, would I recommend a longer leader? No, I'd recommend you start with 12 inches and either go up or down after that. I am checking just the chat, which I mentioned early on in the presentation. I'm going through the chat questions. Leader length using braid to floral. Again, I traditionally go 5 to 10 feet. Unless I'm getting broke off a lot, then I'll probably put a couple of yards. Describe my hook set. That absolutely is a great question. And the answer really is it depends, because the fish don't always bite the same, but you really don't want to set hard. That braid, that's another advantage to using braid, because it doesn't have stretch. So you want to use what's called a reel set. So a lot of time you're just reeling and you'll do what we call a pop. You'll just pop the rod and then just keep tension all the way up. But traditionally with a drop shot, they are going to swallow the bait. Douglas, I have $1,000 for a front graph. What is the best option? I would probably try to find either a used, if I was doing this, I'd get the biggest screen, the most power that you can get, which probably would be a used Lowrance Gen 2 HDS 12 or HDS 10. I'd buy a used HDS 10 or 12 and go for what you know. So channel swings are identified when deep water is close to shallow water. Generally speaking, yes, but it depends on if you're on a reservoir, lake, or river. A channel swing, in the simplest terms, is when the river bends, but not every lake is built off of a river. So it could be a creek bend. It could basically be, imagine a freeway. Sometimes the freeway is just straight. Sometimes the freeway makes a turn. That turn on a freeway would be essentially what your channel bend is. Now imagine being on a freeway going through the mountains and it turns, the freeway turns into the mountain. That would be an example of a channel bend. Hump and saddle make a fist. The hump is the knuckles, the saddle is the gap in between. Absolutely, they're a great example, Joe. David, do I think that the puck should be at the bow or the stern? Guys who are anal retentive have both. They use the puck near the motor connected to the unit at the console. They use the puck at the trolling motor for the unit on the deck. Me, I want the GPS mark to go to the trolling motor every time so that when I get up on the deck, I know what I'm looking at was saved based on the trolling motor. That's just my technique. You need to develop your own. Should the max def offset work after the year is up? Yes, the max def. For those of you who don't know what max def is, that is a great feature on Lowrance and other units that allow you to change the contour lines based on the depth of the lake. So if I'm going to a lake, I'll check whatever website shows how much water is in the lake, and I can offset my unit to change the contour lines to pretty much expose and determine what are going to be humps and channel swings and that sort of thing based on the water level. Great question, Adam. Justin, situation where you only have down imaging, no side imaging, you mark a fish at 45 feet of water. Is there a way to determine what side of the boat the fish or the cone is? No. And you don't need to, Justin. What you need to be able to do is put a waypoint and then essentially make an X and just make multiple casts. That's why for me, when I'm fishing out in 45 feet or deeper, traditionally I'm going to start vertically, because if I mark a fish, I know that that fish is somewhere in that cone. So if I drop my bait in the middle of that cone, that fish, if it's active and it's hungry, will swim from either direction to eat that bait. But you're right, there is a lot of error there, and there's a lot of room but in the cone. Which app from Navionics should you use? There is a free app for your phone. Doesn't give you the contours I just showed you, though. You want to get the Boating USA. That's the one you want to get, Boating USA. That should be sufficient unless you're out of the country. Then there are other options that are more expensive. T-Lane, in 50 to 60 feet, do you delete 030 on the surface to see the bottom? I don't do that, T-Lane. I know you do that, and that's a great feature for you to do. I traditionally don't do that. You can get all caught up in these electronics and the setups and that sort of thing. I believe in the KISS approach. Keep it simple, stupid, silly. But that is a great feature that you could do. And I've seen Tony Lane is my team partner. For those of you who don't know, he is an electronics guru. He does a system where you can adjust the graph to delete the first 30 feet, which you really don't need if you're fishing out in 50 or 60 feet of water. So you see primarily more detail on the bottom. I like to see the whole graph. I don't know why. It doesn't. T-Lane is correct. What hertz or transducer chirp? I'm using chirps on my units, 83-200 kilohertz rather. Mario, I like Navionics Plus. Absolutely. It's a great chart. Without using a swivel, how do you prevent line twists? You know, I prevent line twists by regularly changing my line or by stretching out my line. A lot of times after a day of fishing, before you get to the boat ramp, we'll let our line out in the water, drift behind the boat, and just reel it back in. That's a great way to get rid of line twists. I don't have a lot of problems with line twists. When you use premium fishing lines, you get less line twists. But great question, Thomas. David Gonzalez. I have the app for my Android, paid one-time price. Will a yearly subscription be given to me? Yes. When you buy the app on your phone, it's a yearly subscription. So it's $10 a year. Can I point you in the right location where you find the app for Bluetooth on the HDS units? First of all, Chris, it depends on what HDS unit you have. The simple way to do is to go into settings and it'll say Wi-Fi. Once you go into Wi-Fi, you're gonna have to find your access code and then make sure the Wi-Fi is turned on. Wi-Fi are in a lot of the newer units. So you're talking on the Lowrance side, HDS3 or Carbon. I don't know the other units, but I know the other units have Wi-Fi in them, but it's mostly the newer units. If you have a Gen 2 Lowrance, you would have to purchase a Wi-Fi module they have for it. Victor is absolutely right. The difference between 6 and 8 is the pucker factor. It also is the difference between getting bit and not getting bit. Daniel, yes, your LGC 2000 is sufficient GPS. Do you use Zoom? Zoom function on the unit, Derek, or Zoom worms? I definitely use Zoom worms, and I definitely use the Zoom function on my fish finder. How close to the bottom will your electronics show fish? Electronics will show fish on the bottom if they're set up right and they're premium electronics. They'll show fish on the bottom. Do I use the drop shot for other species? Not unless they bite my bass worm, David, but yes, you can get catfish and stripers and everything that swims on a drop shot. Absolutely. Rashawn, what do you do when a big fish keeps breaking off 8-pound tests? Rashawn, you buy another brand of 8-pound tests, Seaguar or Sunline. I have caught that my largest bass on 6-pound tests is over 10, and I've caught countless 9-pounders on 6-pound tests. You've got to use high premium line. You've got to use premium rods and reels, and more importantly, in addition, you've got to have a premium reel with a good drag. If I'm fishing around Shallow water, I am not using 6-pound tests most of the time if I'm fishing around stuff that a fish can break me off. But I do break off fish. That's just the byproduct of using light line. What are your thoughts on 360 imaging? My thoughts is it works, doesn't work in deep water. That is a shallow water device, and it works great. It's not going to work out in 40, 60 feet of water, which is what this webinar is about. Fishing in northern waters of Wisconsin and Minnesota, Brian, what do you distinguish between walleye in the bottom and bass? You know, that is a great question. And I fished for walleye and I fished for bass in lakes that have walleye. Bass and walleye tend to not habitat the same areas. And so your walleye tend to school up more than bass. And in most cases, a walleye is more aggressive than a bass. And so when you're marking walleye, they look different because there are normally schools of them that are larger schools. And it's one of those things, Brian, that's a great question that is hard to explain. You just know after a while. Do you fish the tops of timber, allow the bait to drop at the bottom, Adam? The answer is it depends, Adam, to where the fish are. On a higher end unit, more expensive fish finder, I can see my bait, my drop shot, and my lure dropping. And I can see that lure and that drop shot at whatever level the fish is located, and I will stop that bait where I see the fish. And that bait, that bass, if it's hungry, will bite it suspended. Do you still get the thick yellow returns on fish when you are using deep, or are they mostly blue? Depends on the color of the water, will dictate what color the fish are. Hopefully that answers your question, Chris. I'm not sure about that. Tim, do you think I can mount the Lowrance pug next to my Minn Kota pug for? Yes, you can. Yeah, absolutely you can, Tim. When you see, I'm trying to see what you're saying, Dustin. Do you spin the trolling motor, try to stop, or kick the boat to the side and pitch back? I do all of the above, Dustin. It really depends on how I found the fish. Sometimes I'll be driving, I'll pick up my rod and I'll drop the rod right there, open the bail, turn around, and the fish will be on there. So it really kind of depends, Dustin. Do I have experience using the power shot? I assume when you say power shot, you're talking heavier line. Absolutely, I do. We do not do that out in 40 to 60 feet of water. And so that's not the topic today. However, we do fish a lot of drop shots at like Clear Lake in the Delta with 10 to 15 pound of line. That's usually like a 0 to 5, 0 to 8 feet kind of a deal. And the topic today is drop shotting in 50 to 60 feet of water. It would take forever for a drop shot to get to 40 to 60 feet of water on heavy line. Do you have experience using, oh, that's what we just said. Sorry about that. Jake, when I'm fishing vertical, I am going to try to stop that bait where I see the fish. And with the electronics that I use and these high-end electronics, you can see your bait falling, and yes, you can stop your bait right in front of that fish. Drop shot will work for a walleye, and it will work with a night crawler on it, Mark. Do I use a different rod for shallow and deep drop shotting? You know, Daniel, I used to do that. I no longer do that. I use a Daiwa Steez drop shot rod for shallow and deep. The difference will be the line size that I use and the bait that I use. Robert, do I split screen? The screen I showed you is what I use 90% of the time. I have the GPS on the bottom. I have sonar on the left. I have down scan on the right. To me, that's the best screen for me. So I can pinpoint where my waypoint is, because traditionally if I'm fishing out in 40 to 60 feet of water, I'm going to have a waypoint somewhere. I want to see what that item is on the sonar, and I want to see what it looks like on the down scan. Hopefully that answers your question, Robert. Ken, repeatedly retrieving a worm that deep will result in a good bit of twist. How do you deal with line twist? We touched on that. If you use a premium fluorocarbon line, you put your line on the reel tight, you have a premium rod and a premium reel, you're not going to get line twist. It just doesn't happen to me. I can't remember when I got a line twist. It only happens when I have old line. And I will change my line often. That's one of the reasons why I'm using braided line. If you're getting line twist, I guarantee you're not using braided line to fluorocarbon. That eliminates, now that I think about it, that eliminates the line twist. You don't get line twist when you're using a braided line to a fluorocarbon. Brandon, I was out the other day, pulled up on an underwater point that it was flat. Long story short, it didn't feel any structure. Caught like a 10 bass on the waypoint. I marked specific start. Dog talk was something sit themselves in the mud in the winter depths. Is this true? The only thing that is constant about bass fishing is nothing is constant. As soon as you think something won't happen, it'll happen. Mario, 30 feet of water, but I couldn't get them to bite using a green pumpkin worm. Would you move or change bait? If I know I'm marking fish and they're not biting, I will change a bait, either a color or length or a style. But normally, when you mark fish in 40 to 60 feet of water, you can catch them. T-Lane just said it. If in 50 to 60 feet of water is video game fishing, do you ever delete surface? Oh, we already said that, T-Lane. How'd that come up again? Brandon Yang. I don't know if that's Bradley Yang. I know a Bradley Yang. I was out the other day, pulled up on an underwater point. Oh, we just said that. How did that come up again? Well worth the $10 app. Thanks, Ron. Do you ever change your max depth or your HD units? Yes, I talked about that a little earlier. What pallet setting do you use? I don't change the pallets. Again, I traditionally stick with factory installed settings because I know what it looks like. And I'm not sciencing. I'm not one of those science up kind of guys. I keep it simple. But again, my team partner is more technical like that. He'll change the pallets. He has a preferred pallet and all that kind of stuff. I don't do all of that. I find a bass. Bass are really not that smart. Like once you figure them out, I don't have a whole lot of tackle. I don't have a lot of colors, but I use premium stuff. So I find the fish and then I catch them. I have a Lowrance LC27. Time to upgrade. Rick, it's time to upgrade, buddy. But you don't have to get new. Get a Gen 1 Lowrance HDS 10. Great unit. Saw just as many fish on that unit as I do my 16-inch Lowrance. Can you prevent line switch from making sure your worm is rigged straight? Talked about rod ring. I don't get line twist. A lot of people get line twist. I don't get line twist. I don't know why I'm not getting line twist. Hell, I don't remember my team partner getting line twist. I just think if you use a quality rod and reel, quality fluorocarbon, tied on the quality braided line, you're not going to get line twist. I don't know. That's not a problem that I have. Donald, I said that there is a free app that does not have the contours that I talked about. The app that shows the type of detail I showed you all today is in fact $9.99. And I guarantee everybody on this webinar will tell you it's the best $10 they've ever spent in their life. If you see your worm twisting as you reel it in, you know you have trouble. Funny rod wind. Reason for 2 GPS antennas. The 2 antennas give you CPU in the head unit, differential between the 2 antennas. General rule, 110, 30 foods. We got a techie. Victor, good job, Victor. Thanks for sharing that. Again, I keep it simple. I got 1 GPS puck. It's at the trolling motor. It gets the job done. For those of you who got that kind of money, got that kind of time, Definitely get 2 GPS pucks. There is a Navionics boating that is free, but it's not going to give you the detail you saw today. That one's going to cost you $9.99. What setting hertz? We talked about that, Ron. 83-200. Use palette 13. Talked about that. I think we're good, fellas. David? Dropshotting with a drifting rocky point for smallmouth, dead sticking, or holding it real set. The dead stick technique works for all kinds of bass, smallmouth, spotted bass, largemouth. What level are you setting your sensitivity to? I don't mess with it. Factory setting, Jake. What is your technique for pinpointing a spot on a map and holding over that spot? My trolling motor, David. My trolling motor, that GPS puck, will tell me where I'm at and ensure that I'm on that spot. And if I have to, I'll zoom in to ensure that I'm on that spot. Toss a whopper popper and have a fin foul with grass and you will get some line twist. Never had line twist. That a lot of people got line twist. Y'all using the wrong line. Sunline or seagull. The most important thing between you and the fish is the fishing line. Please invest in some high quality fishing line. Guys, I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much. This has been recorded. It's going to be put up on Navionics.com. If you have questions, you all have been great. If you have questions, you can email me at rshabazz@Navionics.com. That's rshabazz@Navionics.com. You guys will get an email in a day thanking you for attending. Thank you very much. It's been great. Great questions. If you have questions, continue the questions. Facebook, Ricky Shabazz. Instagram, Dr. Ricky Shabazz. Twitter, Dr. Ricky Shabazz. Have a good evening. Thank you all for listening.